December 21st, 1939. The temperature is 40 degrees below zero. In the forest near the Kollaa River, the air is so cold that the moisture in a man's lungs threatens to freeze with every breath. A patrol of Red Army soldiers pushes through the waist-deep drifts, their heavy brown coats standing out as dark, unmistakable targets against the blinding white wilderness. They are nervous. They stop. They listen. There is no sound but the wind rattling the frozen birch branches. No engine noise. No movement. Then a crack, dry and sharp, like a snapping branch. The lead soldier drops into the snow, life extinguished before his body hits the ground. The others scramble, rifles raised, scanning the tree line in panics, but there is nothing to see. No muzzle flash, no drifting smoke, just the infinite white emptiness. Somewhere in that frozen void, a single pair of eyes is watching through iron sights, patiently waiting for the next man to move. This is not just a battlefield. It is a hunting ground, and they have trespassed into the domain of a man the invaders will soon whisper about, in terror, as the White Death. The invasion begins on the morning of November 30th, 1939, following the breakdown of diplomatic negotiations regarding buffer zones for Leningrad. Joseph Stalin orders the Red Army to surge across the Finnish border. The sheer scale of the offensive is designed to shock the small Nordic nation into immediate submission. Over 400,000 Soviet troops, backed by thousands of tanks and aircraft, roll toward the Finnish defensive lines. In Moscow, the confidence is absolute. Shostakovich has already been commissioned to compose a victory fanfare, and generals advise their troops not to shoot too wildly, lest they accidentally cross into Sweden within the first 2 weeks. On paper, Finland does not stand a chance. The Finnish army is a ragtag force of barely 300,000 men, many of whom are reservists wearing their own civilian clothes, with only a military belt and a cockade on their hats to distinguish them as soldiers. They have virtually no tank corps, almost no anti-tank weaponry, and ammunition stocks that will last only weeks. To the Soviet High Command, this is merely a policing action, a quick march to Helsinki to install a puppet government in time for Stalin's 60th birthday. However, the Soviets have brought a mechanized, road-bound army to fight in a land that is almost entirely forest and frozen swamp. As the columns of T-26 tanks and heavy trucks push into the interior, they find themselves confined to narrow, unpaved logging roads, stretching out for miles in vulnerable, congested lines. Then the weather turns. The winter of 1939 becomes one of the harshest recorded in a century. Temperatures plummet to minus 40 degrees Celsius. Engines seize, lubricants freeze into glue, and unprotected skin turns black with frostbite within minutes. The Red Army is not fighting a disorganized militia. They are fighting the geography itself. While the main Soviet thrust hammers against the Mannerheim Line in the south, a different kind of war emerges in the vast wilderness north of Lake Ladoga. Here, there are no trenches and no fixed fortifications. The battlefield is a labyrinth of snow-covered pine and birch. It is in this sector, along the banks of the Kollaa River, that the numerical advantage of the Red Army begins to disintegrate. The Finnish strategy here is not to match firepower with firepower, but to isolate, starve, and terrify. It is a strategy reliant on individual initiative and the ability to vanish into the landscape, creating the perfect conditions for a singular, unseen threat to emerge. Nowhere is the disparity between the two armies more lethal than along the Kollaa River. Here, the Finnish defenses are dangerously thin. A single Finnish regiment, Infantry Regiment 34 finds itself tasked with holding off the entire Soviet 56th Division and later the 128th, 75th, and 164th Divisions. The odds are mathematically impossible, but the Finns possess a tactical mastery that the rigid Soviet command structure cannot comprehend. They utilize Motti tactics, literally firewood chopping, where agile Finnish ski troops encircle the long road-bound Soviet columns, blow up the lead and rear vehicles, and slice the trapped enemy force into isolated, freezing pockets to be destroyed one by one. The Soviet troops, conscripted largely from warmer southern regions like Ukraine, are woefully unprepared for the Nordic winter. They lack white camouflage, marching in olive-drab greatcoats that turn them into high-contrast silhouettes against the snowdrifts. They lack skis, forcing them to wade through chest-deep powder that exhausts a man in minutes, effectively trapping them on the open roads. As the temperature drops, the Red Army soldiers huddle together around field kitchens and bonfires for warmth, terrified of the dark tree line. They are static, visible, and demoralized. To the Finnish defenders, this environment is not an enemy. It is an ally. They move silently on skis, ghosting through the forests they have known since childhood, striking and vanishing before the Soviets can turn their turrets. The psychological toll on the invaders is absolute. The forest itself seems to have eyes. Every shadow is a potential ambush. Every snap of a twig is a prelude to death. The Soviet command responds with brute force, pouring artillery fire into the empty woods, churning up the snow but hitting nothing. They are fighting a phantom army. It is into this specific sector, this frozen stalemate of attrition and terror, that a reserved 33-year-old corporal reports for duty. He is not a career soldier. He is a farmer and a competitive shooter from the hamlet of Rautjärvi. A man of few words who packs his own food and brings his own rifle. He does not look like a hero, standing just over 5 feet tall, mild-mannered and unassuming. He seems an unlikely candidate to become the focus of an entire army's fear. Yet, as he takes his position in the snowdrifts of Kollaa, the strategic nightmare of the Red Army is about to become a very personal horror. Simo Häyhä is a product of the wilderness he defends. Before the war, he lived a quiet, diligent life in the Karelian Isthmus, farming a small plot of land and hunting foxes and moose in the dense forests. He is a man of extreme patience, conditioned by years of tracking game through deep snow, where a single hasty movement means coming home empty-handed. He joined the Civil Guard at 17, not for glory, but out of civic duty, quietly racking up trophies in local shooting competitions. His house is full of them, but on the front lines he seeks no accolades. He treats the war not as a military maneuver, but as a hunt on a massive scale. He operates alone, moving into position before dawn and remaining motionless until after sunset. His weapon of choice is as understated as the man himself. While other snipers clamor for modern optics, Häyhä carries a standard bolt-action Mosin Nagant M2830, the Pistikova or Spitz rifle. It is a rugged, heavy infantry weapon, iron-sighted and reliable. But in Häyhä's hands, it is a surgical instrument. He knows this specific rifle intimately. He has adjusted the sights himself, filed the trigger mechanism to a hair trigger sensitivity, and memorized its ballistics in the freezing air. He does not fight the weapon. It is an extension of his will. His decision to reject a telescopic scope is a calculated, tactical masterstroke that separates him from every other sniper of the era. A scope forces a shooter to raise their head an inch or two higher to look through the glass. a fatal exposure in the flat light of the winter forest. A scope lens can fog up in the extreme cold, rendering it useless. Or worse, reflect the harsh winter sun, creating a glint that reveals the sniper's position to the enemy. By using open iron sights, Häyhä maintains the lowest possible profile, pressing his cheek tight against the stock, offering a target to the enemy no larger than the top of his fur hat. He is not looking for magnification. He is looking for invisibility. His method goes beyond marksmanship. It is a masterclass in environmental manipulation. Before firing a single round, Häyhä constructs a snow shelf around his position. He packs the soft, powdery snow down into a hard, icy ramp in front of his barrel. This is not for stability. It is to suppress the telltale puff of snow that usually kicks up from the muzzle blast, a dead giveaway to enemy spotters. To mask the vapor of his own breath in the freezing air, he keeps a handful of snow in his mouth, cooling his exhalations until they match the ambient temperature. He lies in the drifts for hours, wrapped in layers of wool and white camouflage, indistinguishable from the snowbank itself, slowing his heart rate, waiting for a Soviet officer to make a mistake. But Häyhä is not merely a passive trap, he is an active hunter. When the Soviet lines push too close, he switches weapons. He carries the Suomi KP-31 submachine gun, a heavy, rapid-fire weapon that sprays 9 millimeter rounds at 900 shots per minute. With this, he stalks small groups of Red Army soldiers through the twilight, ambushing them at close range before melting back into the tree line. He is as lethal at 10 meters as he is at 400. This duality, the unseen sniper and the sudden storm of submachine gunfire, creates a paranoia that ripples through the Soviet ranks. To the invaders, he ceases to be a man and becomes a myth. Belaya Smirt, the White Death. The Soviet command places a bounty on his head. They deploy their own best snipers to hunt him down. Men who scour the forest with optics, looking for him. They never return. Frustrated, the Red Army escalates their tactics. When a patrol takes fire, they do not send infantry to investigate. They call in indirect fire. Heavy artillery barrages churn up entire hectares of forest where Häyhä is suspected to be hiding, shattering trees and turning the white snow grey with cordite and dirt. They are burning down the forest to kill one man. But as the winter deepens and the days lengthen, the pressure on the Kollaa front reaches a breaking point, forcing the hunter into the center of the most violent storm of the war. It is late February 1940. The winter is beginning to break, but the ferocity of the fighting only intensifies. The Red Army, humiliated by months of failure, abandons its reckless columns and adopts a strategy of brute attrition. They are no longer trying to outmaneuver the Finns, they are trying to bury them. The artillery bombardment along the Kollaa River becomes a ceaseless rolling thunder. The pristine white wilderness is gone, replaced by a cratered moonscape of shattered stumps and blackened earth. Simo Häyhä is now operating in a landscape that offers almost no cover. The Soviet commanders have identified his general sector, and they are taking no chances. If a single shot rings out, they do not return fire with rifles. They saturate the entire grid square with high explosive shells and shrapnel. The ground shakes constantly. Häyhä moves more frequently now, forced to abandon his carefully prepared positions after only a few shots. He is tired. The adrenaline of the hunt is replaced by the grinding exhaustion of survival. Yet, his effectiveness does not wane. On the slopes of a ridge the Finns call Killer Hill, the slaughter reaches its peak. Wave after wave of Soviet infantry charges up the incline, driven by commissars and desperation. Häyhä is there, working the bolt of his Mosin Nagant with terrifying rhythm. In a single day, he is credited with 25 confirmed kills. The barrel of his rifle grows hot to the touch. The snow around him is stained dark with soot and spent brass. He is holding the line almost single-handedly in his sector, breaking the morale of entire platoons. But the sheer volume of incoming fire is overwhelming. The air is thick with flying steel. The hunter has become the primary target of an entire division, and the law of averages is closing in. March 6th, 1940. The dawn breaks over the Ulismar forests with a deceptive calm that is quickly shattered by a massive Soviet assault. The Red Army is pushing hard, trying to break the Finnish line before the spring thaw renders the terrain impassable. Häyhä is deployed to the front of a counterattack, moving through the swampy undergrowth with a squad of Finnish soldiers. The fighting is chaotic and close range, no longer the calculated sniper duel of the early winter, but a frantic, muddy brawl for survival. As the Finns advance, they run headlong into a dug-in Soviet position. The air fills with the snap of bullets and the roar of grenades. Häyhä raises his rifle, scanning for a target, but this time the enemy sees him first. A Soviet soldier, spotting the movement, fires a single round. It is not a standard lead bullet. It is an explosive incendiary round, designed to detonate on impact. The bullet strikes Häyhä in the lower left jaw. The impact is catastrophic. The projectile shatters the bone and tears through the tissue, effectively blowing off the lower half of his face. He collapses into the snow, the blood immediately freezing against the ice. The chaos of the battle rages over his fallen body. For moments that stretch into eternity, he lies still, indistinguishable from the hundreds of dead scattered across the forest floor. But he is not dead. A fellow soldier, crawling through the carnage, spots the familiar figure and drags him into the cover of a shallow depression. The soldier looks at Häyhä's face and recoils in horror, later reporting that half his head was missing. Yet, miraculously, there is a pulse. They heave him onto a sled, dragging him rearward through the deep drifts as the artillery pounds the earth behind them. Simo Häyhä, the invincible White Death, drifts into a deep coma, leaving the war behind him just as the final act approaches. Häyhä lies in a hospital bed in Jyväskylä. It is March 13th, 1940. He has been unconscious for a week. Slowly, the darkness recedes. He opens his eyes. The first thing he notices is the silence. The artillery has stopped. The screaming of the Stuka dive bombers is gone. He does not know it yet, but on this exact morning, the Moscow Peace Treaty has been signed. The Winter War is over. His personal war, however, is far from finished. The explosive bullet has left him permanently disfigured. His jaw is shattered. His left cheek is gone, and he cannot speak. It will take 26 separate surgeries over several years to rebuild his face using bone from his hip. But he is alive. In recognition of his service, he is promoted from corporal straight to second lieutenant by Field Marshal Mannerheim, a feat unmatched in Finnish military history. As the dust settles, the military historians begin to tally the logs. The numbers are difficult to comprehend. In just 98 days of combat amidst the short daylight hours of the Arctic winter, Simo Häyhä has officially confirmed 505 kills with his rifle. Unofficial counts, including his submachine gun kills, push the number as high as 542. Even taking the most conservative estimates, he averaged nearly 6 kills a day, every day, for 3 months. It is a record of lethal efficiency that stands untouched in the history of modern warfare. But for the man in the hospital bed, the numbers mean nothing compared to the silence of the forests he can no longer walk. The peace comes with a bitter price. The treaty forces Finland to cede 10% of its territory to the Soviet Union, including the very forests Häyhä fought to defend. His family farm in Rautjärvi is now on the wrong side of the new border. The man who held back an army is now a refugee in his own country, landless and scarred. Yet, the impact of his resistance ripples far beyond the lost borders of Karelia. The Red Army, bloodied and humiliated by the Finnish ghosts, undertakes a massive reform of its military doctrine. They study the Finnish tactics obsessively. The Soviet sniper schools are completely overhauled, moving away from rigid volley fire to the independent camouflage warfare that decimated them in the snow. Ironically, the deadly Soviet snipers who will later become famous in the ruins of Stalingrad, legends like Vasily Zaitsev, are the direct tactical descendants of the lessons Simo Häyhä taught them in the winter of 1939. Häyhä himself retreats into obscurity. He does not write a memoir. He does not go on speaking tours. He settles on a small farm in southeastern Finland, becoming a successful dog breeder and moose hunter. For decades he lives quietly, often receiving hate mail and death threats, which he ignores with the same stoic calm he once displayed in the sniper's nest. When reporters finally track him down in his later years, expecting a bloodthirsty warrior, they find a gentle white-haired man who speaks softly and offers them coffee. When asked if he regrets killing so many people, his answer is simple and devoid of hatred. I did what I was told to do, as well as I could. Simo Häyhä died in 2002 at the age of 96. He passed away in a quiet veterans' home, far removed from the frozen hell of the Kollaa River. His life stands as a stark paradox in the history of conflict. In an era defined by industrial slaughter, where machines and artillery dominated the battlefield, the most feared weapon of the Winter War was a single farmer with a bolt-action rifle and a pocket full of snow. He was not a killer by nature. He was a guardian by necessity. He did not fight for ideology or conquest, but for the very specific, tangible reality of his own home. In the end, the legend of the White Death serves as a chilling reminder of a fundamental truth, that the deadliest soldier is not the one who hates the enemy in front of him, but the one who loves the country behind him.